They called her filthy, a disgrace, cast her out with nothing but a baby in her arms and shame on her name. They turned their backs, slammed the church doors, and left her. But in the forest, where no mercy lived, a stranger found her, a Comanche warrior with firelight in his eyes and silence in his soul. He carried her when she couldn't walk, held her child when fever burned, and never once asked for anything. Years passed. Then 6 men returned, armed with judgment, pride, and loaded guns. They called it a rescue. She didn't hide, didn't beg. She stepped forward, eyes fierce and voice steady. You want to save me? Then listen. I already chose, and I choose him. Evelyn Hart had always been the picture of grace. Pressed white collars, folded hands, lips stitched closed by scripture. She knew her place, and the town of Red Hollow praised her for it. She led children's choir, embroidered altar cloths, poured tea with downcast eyes, and never questioned her father's sermons. When she walked through town, even the elders nodded with approval. Such a good girl, the Lord's own lamb. What no one saw was how tightly Evelyn clenched her hands at night to stop them from shaking, how her knees ached from hours on the chapel floor, scrubbing until her skin cracked, how the verses she memorized became manacles instead of light. And still she obeyed, until the night that shattered her world. It was after evening rain, the streets glazed with mud and thunder still rumbling in the hills. Evelyn was alone. Caleb had been called to a late prayer vigil. Lenora was visiting her sick sister on the other side of town. The lamps flickered low. She was darning baby socks for the charity basket when a knock rattled the back door. It was Sheriff Granger. He was soaked from the storm, boots caked with dirt, eyes gleaming from whiskey and something worse. She hesitated. He was a man of the law, a protector. She opened the door. He crossed the threshold before she could speak. And when it was done, when the broken plate lay on the kitchen floor and Evelyn's mouth tasted of copper and prayers she never finished, he buttoned his coat, tipped his hat like nothing had happened, and vanished into the mist. She didn't scream, didn't run, because no one would believe her. Not against Sheriff Granger. He had baptized his badge in years of loyalty, escorted widows, shot outlaws, donated to the school fund. He stood with Preacher Hart on Sunday mornings. She knew what would happen if she spoke. She would be blamed. He would be blessed. So she said nothing. But truth, like life, finds a way to rise. By the 5th week, she was retching every morning. Lenora noticed first but didn't say a word. Her eyes were red, but her lips stayed sealed. Caleb, however, noticed soon enough. He stormed into the kitchen one morning, holding the doctor's note Evelyn had tried to hide. His hands shook, not with grief, but fury. You've ruined everything, he spat. The Lord's house, my name, this entire town. Evelyn tried to explain. Her voice barely worked. He forced me. I didn't. He came in. Caleb struck the table with a clenched fist. Don't lie in God's house. Lenora opened her mouth. Caleb's glare pinned her to silence. She lowered her eyes and stepped back into the shadows. By Sunday, the town knew. Caleb made her stand on the chapel steps, stomach round, face pale. Not one soul stepped forward, not the women she'd prayed beside, not the children she'd taught to sing. Stones struck her shoes, whispers cut sharper than blades. That night, someone nailed a sign to the door, unclean. Then came the final blow. When the child was born, a boy, wailing and red-faced, Evelyn named him Ashen, for the dust she'd been cast into and for the flame that still flickered inside her. But her father refused to let her stay. He has no father. He is not blessed. He is a stain. You will leave at dawn. Take the child. Take your shame. But you do not take our name. And that was it. No prayer, no blessing, no cradle. Only a tin cup, a moth-eaten shawl, and the sound of the church bells tolling her exile. The morning she left Red Hollow, the ground was cold enough to cut skin. Evelyn Hart stood just beyond the threshold of her father's house, no, his house now, with nothing but a thin wool shawl over her shoulders, a cracked tin cup dangling from her waist, and her child clutched tight to her chest. Ashen stirred beneath the wrap, his small body pressing into her collarbone, seeking warmth that Evelyn could no longer promise. No one came to say goodbye. No neighbors peeked from behind curtains. No voice called after her, not even Lenora's. She stepped into the dust barefoot, feeling every pebble, every broken branch that lined the edge of the forest. Her soul split by noon, her heels bled by dusk. Still she walked. The trees swallowed her like a mouth. And the farther she went, the quieter the world became. No horses, no hymnals, just the wind and her thoughts. By the second day, Evelyn's lips were cracked open. Her breath tasted like iron. She rationed a crust of bread from a stranger's pity, soaked it in water from a stream she wasn't sure was clean. Ashen cried often. His wails were small, high-pitched, new lungs learning pain. Evelyn tried to hush him with songs, but her voice broke. The only melody she could recall was from childhood. Only the pure shall pass through fire. Only the pure shall rise. She stopped singing halfway through. Her hands were shaking. That night it rained. She curled beneath a pine tree, needles stabbing through her shawl, cold soaking into her bones. She shielded Ashen beneath the wrap, arms wrapped around him like armor. The firewood she tried to gather had gone damp. She couldn't start a spark. Somewhere nearby, wolves howled. One call, then another, echoing through the valley like a warning. Evelyn pressed Ashen closer. She whispered nonsense. Promises. Shh. You're all right, little one. You're safe. Mama's here. You're safe. But the words didn't feel true. Not even to her. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her body ached like she'd been beaten. Her mind, it frayed. She saw things. A burning chapel, its steeple twisted in flame. Caleb's belt snapping through air like a whip. The choir boys throwing stones. Their angelic voices singing, "Only the pure." She stumbled over a root and collapsed to her knees. Her vision blurred. Ashen cried, and the sound scraped her open from the inside. And for a moment, just a moment, something inside her broke. She stumbled forward, vision blurry. Her knees hit the earth, her arms aching. Ahead was a flat rock, worn smooth by wind and time. For a breathless second, she stared at it. The thought crossed her mind, dark and sudden. What if? He didn't have to suffer. Her hands trembled. But before she could even loosen the wrap, Ashen whimpered. A small, reaching sound. Not a cry, not a demand. Just presence. That was enough. Evelyn collapsed over him, holding him fiercely, whispering, "No, I'm here. I'm here." She kissed his brow, sobbing, rocking them both beneath the gray sky. Ashen settled, his body small and warm against her chest. And Evelyn knew she would carry him through dust, through fire, through every silence this world tried to bury them in. That night, fearing more wolves, she attempted to climb a tree near the creek's edge, bracing him against her chest, using one arm to hoist herself upward. The bark slipped. Her fingers gave out. She fell hard. Her back struck a root. Her head cracked against stone. And then, the world went dark. The cry cut through the forest like a blade. Not the cry of an animal, not the warning of wolves or the call of owls. It was something smaller, wounded, human. Tekoa paused mid-step, his moccasins sinking into damp moss. He had been tracking elk along the ridgeline for hours, his bow silent, his eyes scanning for prints in the frost. But now all his instincts turned inward. That cry, it didn't belong here. Another sound followed, softer this time, a whimper, then silence. He lowered his bow, breath held. Some part of him warned, it could be a trap. White men had lured warriors this way before, using women's screams, children's sobs, and yet the forest around him felt still, not dangerous, just broken. He moved carefully, weaving between pine and ash until he reached a small grove near the creek's edge. And there, half buried in fallen leaves and the scent of blood, was what he had heard. A woman, pale-skinned, unconscious. Her head rested against a rock, blood crusting near her temple. Curled into her arms, tucked beneath a threadbare shawl, was a baby, still alive. The woman's arms, bruised and trembling, held the child as if even in death she'd refused to let go. Tekoa knelt slowly, his hand hovering near his knife out of habit, not threat. The child stirred. A small cough. Alive. Weak, but alive. The mother, too, barely breathing. For a long moment, Tekoa didn't move. His heart pounded, not from fear, but memory. Years ago, his sister Misi had been found in the snow just like this, arms frozen around her daughter after a raid. The white men had come in the night, burning tents, tearing open winter shelters. By the time Tekoa returned, the snow was red. The child had lived 3 days, then silence. Now here he was, years later, looking at a ghost of the same scene. He knew the risk. If someone saw him carrying a white woman and her baby, he would be hunted, called savage, accused of kidnapping or worse. Red Hollow wasn't far. Men with badges and anger lived there. But something inside him stirred. Something older than fear, older than hatred. He looked to the sky. Then he pulled a small satchel from his side and took out a smooth forked twig. From his pouch he untied a black feather and a strip of sinew. Kneeling, he planted the symbol in the earth beside them. Then he whispered to the wind, "I bring no harm, only life." He touched the ground with 2 fingers. "Mother, grant me the right to shelter the broken." Then with practiced care, he examined the woman's leg. Her ankle was badly twisted, the skin torn raw from walking too far in shoes not made for wilderness. He found 2 pieces of bark, bound them with leather from his own wrist, and secured the makeshift splint. Finally, he lifted her into his arms. She moaned but didn't wake. The child stirred. Tekoa shifted his weight, holding both close. With a single sharp whistle, his horse emerged from the trees, silent, loyal, waiting. And without another word, Tekoa carried them away from the edge of death, into the folds of Stonebend Valley, where no one from Red Hollow would ever think to look. Evelyn woke to the scent of wood smoke and pine. The air was warm, wrapped in something soft. She blinked against dim light filtering through stretched hide and bark. Around her, the space felt curved, animal pelts on the floor, herbs hanging from rafters, a low fire crackling in the center of a stone circle. Ashen stirred against her side, his breath warm, his skin no longer cold. He was alive. Her fingers trembled as she pulled him closer. Where were they? Then the shelter's entrance shifted. A shadow stepped inside. Tall, broad-shouldered, quiet. Tekoa. He didn't speak, didn't reach for her. He simply knelt a few feet away, set down a wooden bowl filled with dark berries, a folded leaf pouch, and something wrapped in soft bark. He didn't make eye contact, just moved with steady, measured calm. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Panic surged. Without warning, she snatched up Ashen and bolted. Out the back flap, past a line of trees, her bare feet thudding against the mossy earth. Branches scraped her skin. The cold bit through her shawl. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. She made it a few dozen yards before her ankle buckled beneath her. Pain exploded up her leg and she tumbled to the forest floor, clutching Ashen tightly. She lay there gasping, listening. No one followed. And then, just a few minutes later, she heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind her. Evelyn curled tighter. "Don't come closer," she rasped, but he didn't. Tekoa simply approached slowly, crouched a few paces away, and without a word set the pouch of berries down on a flat stone beside her. Then he turned and walked away, his back to her, open, unthreatening. That night she didn't return to the shelter. She curled beneath a low cedar, using her shawl to swaddle Ashen. The wind was sharp, her skin fevered. Sometime after midnight, she stumbled toward a nearby stream to splash water on her face. She never saw the snake. Its strike was fast, fangs sinking into her calf before she even cried out. Pain bloomed like fire under her skin. Her scream echoed through the trees. Then, he was there. Tekoa appeared from the darkness, dropped to his knees beside her, and without hesitation, tore the fabric from her leg. He found the puncture, pressed his mouth to it, and drew the venom out, spat blood into the grass again and again. He worked swiftly, packing crushed herbs into the wound, binding it with strips of hide. Her vision blurred. She could barely breathe. He lifted her with a strength that felt unreal, carried her like a feather. Ashen was already bundled when she woke again, resting between furs near the fire. Takoa sat beside the hearth, his eyes on the flames, his hand gently brushing sweat from her brow. He didn't speak, just watched, protected. When her fever broke 2 days later, she whispered the name aloud. His name is Ashen. Takoa blinked, then nodded. He picked up a piece of soft bark and used a bone knife to show her how to carve a simple arrowhead. She watched, curious, then took the blade from him and scratched Ashen's name beside it. Days passed like mist, slowly, softly. They mended things together, her torn cloak, his worn hunting bag. And when she found the red ribbon hidden in her shawl, a thread from her old prayer dress, she stitched it quietly into the hem of his cloak. He noticed, but said nothing. He just smiled, barely. But she saw it. The wind shifted that morning. Evelyn stood at the edge of a wild rye field, Ashen tied snugly against her hip in a cotton sling. The child slept soundly, his dark lashes fluttering with dreams. But Evelyn's eyes were sharp, fixed on the distant ridge. Dust, hoofbeats, men. Her breath caught. Takoa emerged from the tree line moments later, his bow slung across his back, a bundle of foraged bark in his hand. He saw the tension in her face before she spoke. "They're coming," she said. "6 riders." He didn't ask who. He already knew. They moved quickly. Evelyn lifted Ashen into Takoa's arms and kissed his cheek. "Stay back," she said softly. "No matter what they say, don't move." He hesitated, then nodded. The riders arrived in thunder and smoke, horses frothing, eyes fierce. At the front, Deputy Granger, badge dull with dust, face full of purpose, twisted into pride. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, pulling his horse to a stop. "Look what the savages dragged in." Behind him, men Evelyn recognized. Red Hollow's farmers, ranch hands, pew sitters, men who'd once nodded at her in Sunday school. She didn't flinch. Granger dismounted and stepped closer. "We've come to rescue you, Miss Hart. That wild dog forced you out here? Or was this your idea of rebellion?" "I'm not Miss Hart anymore," she said calmly, "and I don't need rescuing." One of the townsmen snorted. "She's got the baby and all, probably brainwashed. You don't know what you're saying." Another man dismounted and reached for her arm. "Come on now, Evelyn, let's not make a scene." His fingers wrapped around her wrist. She ripped away. "Don't touch me." Takoa tensed in the background but didn't move, his expression unreadable. Granger's tone turned sharper. "Tell us the truth, Evelyn. Did he take you? Hurt the child? You scared?" She stepped forward, planting herself between the men and the trees behind her. And then her voice rose, clear, defiant. "You want to save me?" she called, loud enough for the whole valley to hear. "Then listen. I already chose." She turned to Takoa and pulled the red ribbon from around her neck, the last relic of her former life. Her fingers trembled as she tied it onto his wrist, a band of memory turned into a vow. "And I choose him." Gasp from the group. She wasn't done. "This man held my child through fever," she said, tears burning her eyes but not her voice. "He rode into fire to save a stranger's son. He built our home with his hands and never once made me feel small or dirty or afraid." The men looked at one another. Silence thickened. Then one of them muttered, "She ain't chained. She's free." Granger scowled. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," she said, lifting her chin, "but it's mine to make." One by one, the riders turned and rode away. The wind changed with no warning. Takoa was the first to notice. He stood by the edge of the woods, sharpening a blade of riverstone, when he lifted his head and stilled. The air had turned dry, bitter, laced with something acrid. Smoke. He sniffed again. No mistaking it. Pine and pitch, scorched in the distance. His jaw tightened. Evelyn emerged from the garden patch with Ashen on her hip, his fingers sticky from wild berries. "What is it?" she asked. Takoa didn't answer at first, just stared toward the southern ridge. "Fire," he said at last. "Coming fast." They moved quickly, covered the ceilings with damp hides, threw water across the cabin walls, gathered what food they could into a leather pack. By mid-afternoon, the smoke rolled down like fog. The air turned orange. Branches cracked in the far hills. Birds scattered. The sky darkened, not with night, but ash. Then came the scream, high, piercing, a child. Tekoa's head snapped toward the sound. Evelyn's breath caught. "It's Rowan," she said, the neighbor's son, barely 5. Evelyn had seen him just days ago, chasing a grasshopper with a carved stick. His parents had gone to gather water that morning. He must have gotten lost. The scream came again, closer now, swallowed in flame. Before Evelyn could speak, Tekoa was already moving. "Tekoa! No! Wait!" But he didn't. He ran headlong toward the fire line, his figure disappearing into the smoke like a shadow into water. Flames danced along the treetops. Embers spat from the ground. Evelyn grabbed Ashen, wrapped him in wet cloth, and prayed. Tekoa found Rowan huddled beside a scorched stump, coughing, tears streaking down a soot-covered face. "Help!" the boy choked. Tekoa didn't hesitate. He wrapped the child in his own coat, slung him over one shoulder, and turned to run. But a flaming branch cracked above. He heard it just before it fell. He shoved the boy clear, but the fire struck his shoulder, the heat searing through fabric and skin. He staggered, clutching the boy tighter, stumbling blindly through smoke. When Evelyn saw them emerge, both alive but broken, she dropped to her knees. She pulled Rowan into her arms, then grabbed Tekoa beneath the arms and dragged him toward the cabin. His legs buckled. He collapsed near the doorway, half conscious, face streaked with ash, his shoulder blackened and raw. The fire passed slowly, as if reluctant to leave. But it did. By dawn, the valley lay charred. Trees stood like blackened skeletons. The earth steamed, but their home still stood. Inside, Evelyn worked without sleep. She soaked cloths in cool water, packed Tekoa's burns with poultices made from crushed yarrow and wild honey. She whispered to him through the fever, though he never stirred. On the second night, he thrashed, murmuring in a language she didn't understand. Visions clawed through his unconscious mind. Flashes of his mother's face, her hands over fire, whispering prayers. His sister Misi, running through smoke, calling his name. A circle of flames, warriors seated silently, nodding toward him. A single voice echoed through it all. "You carry more than your scars." When he woke, the room was dim, lit only by a single flame in the hearth. Evelyn knelt beside him, eyes rimmed red, hands trembling. "You came back," she whispered, voice raw. He tried to speak, but she pressed her fingers gently to his lips. "I'm not the preacher's daughter anymore," she said. "Not in Red Hollow, not in anyone's book. But I'm yours. Not by law, not by sermon, by soul." Tekoa didn't answer. Instead, he reached for her hand and turned it palm up. A small scar traced across the skin where she'd burned herself tending to him. Gently, he brought it to his lips and kissed it. A vow without words, a flame without pain. Spring returned slowly to the valley, soft-footed and gentle. The rains had washed away most of the ash. Tiny green shoots pushed through blackened soil, determined. Birds returned to the trees with cautious song, and the sun lingered longer on the ridge each evening. Evelyn and Tekoa rebuilt not all at once, but in small, deliberate steps. One beam, one rope, one woven wall at a time. The new home was shaped by both their hands. Cedar logs, clay, mud-sealed joints, and strips of deer hide for insulation. Where the old shelter had bent to survive, this one stood in quiet pride. Near the cabin, Evelyn pitched a second structure, a large canvas tent with a flap door and a circle of stones in front. It became a school. No chalkboard, no pews, no punishment, just a woven mat, scraps of hide to write on, and a soft-spoken woman who believed that stories could grow stronger than fences. The students came slowly at first. Shy children from Comanche camps, Kiowa families hidden in the woods, and eventually a settler girl whose father had once spat at Evelyn's feet in Red Hollow. Evelyn didn't turn any away. She taught them how to trace letters in ash, how to stitch a name into cloth, and how to carve their histories into bark with care. No one paid with coin, only curiosity. Ashen grew, wild and bright like the sun over snow. His feet carried him farther each day. His words came fast and fearless. Rowan, the boy they'd saved from fire, became Evelyn's helper, her shadow, her apprentice. He mended things, carried water, and sat with Ashen each evening by the fire to swap stories. One morning, while Ashen napped in a hammock strung between two pines, Tekoa knelt near the river with a stone in his hands. He worked slowly, smoothing it with sand, carving with the tip of his blade. When Evelyn approached, she saw the words etched into its surface: Hope of Fire and Moonlight. She touched the letters gently. Why that? Tekoa looked at her, his voice quiet but sure. Fire is how she survived, he said, eyes on the sleeping child. Moonlight is how I found you. That night, Evelyn lay awake beside the fire, ashen curled between them. She watched the shadows flicker across Tekoa's face, his eyes soft, his breath steady. The wind rustled the canvas above, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost inside her own life. Weeks passed. The garden bloomed. Children came and stayed longer. Rowan laughed more. The land healed as they had. Then one evening, they climbed the ridge. Evelyn stood beside Tekoa, Ashen held against her chest, and Rowan just behind them. From that high place, they could see the distant outline of Red Hollow, faint and far, its steeple a pin against the horizon. She didn't turn away. I don't need to be welcomed back, she whispered, not bitter but certain. I only need to be loved. Just then, something whistled softly through the air and landed in the grass at her feet. A feathered arrow, decorated with beads, planted gently in the soil, its tip facing east. Tekoa knelt and examined it, then smiled. It means, he said, lifting it for her to see, this land accepts us. Evelyn closed her eyes and breathed. Some stories don't end with a wedding or a courtroom or a sermon. Some stories end on a ridge, looking back, not in bitterness, but in peace. Evelyn Hart was cast out for breaking the rules of her time, but she didn't break. She rebuilt. Tekoa wasn't the man they wanted her to choose. He was the man who never left her side. Not when the world cast stones, not when the fire came, not when her name was dust. And in the end, they didn't just survive. They created a new kind of family, one stitched not by blood, but by choice, by courage. In today's world, we still shame women for speaking up. We still fear what we don't understand. We still judge people by where they came from, instead of how they show up in our lives. But maybe we don't have to. Maybe like Evelyn and Tekoa, we can build something gentler, something wiser. What would you have done in her place? Would you have left, stayed, chosen silence, or defiance? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if this story reminded you of something from your own life. If you believe love is more than rules, if you've ever had to walk away to find peace, then you're already part of this story. Thank you for writing with us today. Please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This is Wild West Love Stories, where the bullets missed, but the hearts didn't.